So, not too long ago, I was having a discussion with someone who had listened to the podcast, and they claimed that all I ever do is talk about sex, which seemed like a pretty serious misunderstanding, as is what it is that I'm about to talk about on this episode. Because I'm supposed to be dealing with relationships, but most of what people have been saying that I'm supposed to discuss on this episode has been nothing but a misunderstanding. But still, I am still supposed to be talking about relationships. Not necessarily sex though. But before I get to that, I want us to discuss something that is not even related to relationships in any way, and it's actually an inspirational story from South America. Now, 4 children, including a baby, have been found alive in the Amazon jungle after they survived a plane crash on the 1st of May. Now, this was confirmed by Colombian officials, and I really wanted to get into that story, but because I do not like to disappoint my fans, and there was someone that was claiming that I usually just talk about sex, let me bring something a little bit close to that. Now, according to scientists, there are tiny mites called demodex that are living and mating on your face right now. So as far as talking about sex on this podcast goes, that's your dose for this episode. And I will break it down in 3, 2,
get ready for the battle of the sexes.
To actually think about it for a quick second and really visualize the fact that you might be going through a dry spell, you with your single ass, if you are single, if you're in a relationship, you're probably safe from this, you with your ass that has not been getting some, has pretty much had your face used as a bedroom for a couple of animals that are very, very tiny and microscopic to actually do their thing and get some. So in some ways, you could say that you're contributing to society, except that there's no kids being spilled here. But anyways, let me just read the story for you real quick. The story reads, and I quote, "There are 2 different types of mites, Demodex folliculorum, which inhabit the hair follicles and eat skin cells, and Demodex brevis, which live on our faces and near our sebaceous glands and eat the oil secreted from human skin, according to Cleveland Clinic. During the day, they hang out inside of our paws, and at night look for other mites on our face to mate with. When they are done, they head back to your paws to lay their eggs," explained the show host Hank Green. Green said that the adult Demodex will lay around 20 to 24 eggs on your hair follicles, and within about 3 to 4 days, the young ones will hatch. Their lifespan will end a few weeks later, at which point the dead mites will decompose in your follicles or sebaceous glands, turning the tiny pockets of your skin into little mite graveyards, Green stated. However, although this may sound alarming, the mites are harmless and are found on pretty much everyone. End quote. End of the article. So essentially, what he's trying to say is, we're fucked. Yes, we're fucked. And the unfortunate side of it is, you're fucked and you're not even enjoying the pleasure of it. There's just a bunch of mites on your face that are busy shagging. But in some way or another, you can actually go to bed and probably think about it nicely, because when you kind of think about it, you've been getting bedroom action even though you're in bed alone and even though your face is the bedroom. So if you want someone to sit on your face, this is your moment to feel good because you've been having something sitting on your face. And if you've been feeling like everything that I've been saying since the podcast began has been absolute garbage, then I can totally agree with you, because this is not related to anything at all. This is just a bit of gross information to kind of remind you that you're a part of nature, and nature stuff happens everywhere, your face included. So now we can start the podcast in a more civilized manner, where I get to start by saying, welcome to Breakdown on West Side, your number 1 breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who believes that we're all fucked. So if you're neither getting some nor being screwed by life, at least you know that it's happening on your face. He's a man who still believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denverby. This show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationships show where I get to talk about faces, I get to talk about sitting on them, sometimes. Although for the most part, it's not about sex alone, there is love and relationships and a bunch of guy shit here and there. But if you do not agree with what it is that I talk about, if you feel like some of my views might be contrary to what you believe, and you feel like you need to give that feedback or you need to suggest something that we should talk about, then the place to hit me up on is at Breaktime on my side, on IG, on Facebook. The DMs are always open. You can slide in there and I will be more than happy to receive and give feedback. On Twitter, if you want to suggest a tweet that should be discussed or give your feedback or even just say hi, at Bagaka the D is the way you hit me up. And if there is any topic that you feel I should cover, I might just get into it and handle it accordingly. Now, we have a very interesting episode where I'm about to play a particularly basic video, but there's a couple of misunderstandings that are there in terms of whatever the hell has been said, and I will get to that in a little bit. But before I do that, we need to talk about people and fake news, or at least some version of fake news. Now, about a week or two ago, there was someone who posted up a story claiming that the man who proposed to a lady with a chopper has reportedly turned into a drunkard after their affair flopped. Now, I'm gonna read for you the story and then I'm gonna tell you why I believe it's fake. So, the story goes, in 2015, a young man by the name of Lonina Leitepan caused a buzz after he hired a helicopter to propose to fashion blogger Sharon Mundia at the foothills of Mount Kenya. The engagement was the talk of the town for days. A year later, they walked down the aisle in a lavish wedding ceremony that also trended for days. However, their marriage did not last for long. Rumors circulated that their marriage failed because Mundia was involved with other women. It is now emerging that Sharon's ex-husband became an alcoholic after the messy divorce. His failed marriage is said to have turned him into an alcoholic. When he fell in love with Sharon Mundia and eventually married her, he was a youth banking manager at Chase Bank. End quote. Now, the interesting part about it is, the person who posted up the photos of the entire thing mixed stuff up, because I have no recollection of that story, because I can remember it trended, because during that time, This Is S, aka Sharon Mundia, was a particularly hot celebrity at that point in time. So when she got engaged and it was done with beautiful nature views around her and shit, I can remember how that photo looked and I can remember how everyone talked about it. But I never heard of anything that mentioned that there was a chopper ride involved. I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I didn't get that detail, but I just never really heard that part. Then also when I look at the photos that have been posted up, it's a mixture of this particular story, which has Sharon Mundia and the man's with a wedding photo here, but also some other dude from, I think it's South Africa, who actually did the whole proposal like this. So I'm sitting back busy thinking, it could be true, it could not be true, but if someone is mixing up the photos and is busy talking about chopper rides, and yet there might not have been any, then does it mean that it's particularly real? Now, of course, the realities of it aside, if this is actually real, then it's particularly sad. But I know that there's gonna be a bunch of guys that are gonna talk about how marriage is a bad idea, or you should fear women and shit. To which the reality of it is Chase Bank pretty much went down and under. We don't know if this guy has been doing pretty well or not besides that. Then also, I don't think going and having a thing with a bunch of babes is something to end a marriage over. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'd probably ask for a threesome here and there, but having a thing with a babe, I don't think it's something to end a marriage over. But then again, I'm not a married person, so I really can't say too much about this. But all in all, I don't entirely believe the story. But even though it did happen, I wouldn't blame this on the case of divorce and the fact that the babe left the dude. There's so many other things that can cause someone to go into depression. Hell, going broke after a divorce can cause someone to become an alcoholic. That's something that probably a lot of people don't entirely get. But most times, people will make it seem as though it's the woman that has driven the person into alcoholism, and yet it can be one or two other factors or a combination of multiple factors. Now, by all means, if the babe remained, would he not have been a drunkard? Can't say for sure, but it's also possible. But all in all, I've always tried to tell people, try and verify a lot of the shit that you end up reading, because not all of it is true. Some of it is just meant to trend and to raise eyebrows and catch attention and shit, because that's the current world that we live in right now. And if you ever get dumped by a babe, if you ever get dropped by a babe, by all means, I can understand that, it's a very shitty feeling. Hell, even though you're dropped by a guy, I think it's a very shitty feeling. and I can get why some people can turn into alcoholics or become depressed. But to save yourself from most of that shit, the moment you get dropped, go and sign up and join the gym. Go find yourself in the gym the following Monday morning or the following day, if possible, and start working your ass off. Go get that revenge body. Go feel a lot better after feeling a bunch of shit the previous night, and move the fuck on. I'm not saying that it's gonna be easy. I'm not saying that it's gonna be an instantaneous thing. It's gonna be one of those things that will take time, but if you start moving in the positive path, there's a pretty good chance that at least starting from the gym, trying to make yourself a little bit better, should put you on the right path towards moving on. And even though it doesn't necessarily put you on the path to move on, if you do focus on looking ahead as opposed to looking back and, all the good times that you had, you actually have a much better chance of moving on to something better, or even just being generally happier, which could benefit you in one way or another. The ex might want to come back, something that is very debatable on whether it should happen, but also it gives you a chance to at least go on to something else. It doesn't mean that what you've lost is going to be the best thing, but it also doesn't mean that it'll be the worst. But looking ahead will always be a good idea. Anyways, all that said and done, I do have a main topic that I need to move on to. So, moving things along. Now, while I was on IG about a week ago, there was a video that I stumbled onto that I felt should be discussed. Now, the contents are particularly more or less the same as stuff that you've been hearing for the past, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 years, but I do feel like there's something that needs to be discussed for reasons that I think you probably might not notice up until I get to like midway through my explanation. But either way, let me just play it for you. So, here it is.
These young boys today, what do she bring to the table? The hell you mean, man? What do your ass bring to the table? You got a woman that can come to the table that can make another you. What else she need to slide up to the table with? What about your job? What happened to men who were supposed to be responsible? Do you know that it's our job to take care of a woman and some children, to have a family? That's our damn job.
But what happens to when the woman tell you, I don't need a man, Steve?
Well, they need to what? Okay, if you don't, how that's working? How that's working? Who don't need no man?
I'm independent. I can do for myself.
Yeah, but why do you want to? Yeah, okay, you can drop a transmission. You can sandblast your house. But hell, do you want to?
No.
If somebody could get out there and drop this transmission for you and sandblast your house, why don't you go get your nails done?
Okay, so that particular clip was taken from the podcast that is done by, I think his name is Shannon Sharp, and the guy talking is Steve Harvey for the most part. The person interjecting was Shannon Sharp, just so you know. Now, of course, this is something that I feel has been discussed all the way till its end, because a fuck ton of people have had these discussions about what does so-and-so bring to the table, and it's about as new of an argument as, I guess, the year 2021 or 2022. Because those past years are the ones where people were still having these arguments. I think we actually got to a point where people just stopped wanting to have these arguments because no one ever came to a unified conclusion on how all of these questions are supposed to be answered. The whole tables argument kind of felt a bit, I guess, overblown to a certain degree for a lot of people. But now, the way Steve Harvey was explaining it was something that I didn't particularly like, and I'll leave the whole independent woman thing from this entire thing because it's not particularly relevant to this. Because when someone is like, no, it doesn't matter what she brings, she can, produce a bunch of kids, like, that's like me saying that the only thing that I should bring to the table is my height because I have good genetics. Like, that argument is about as shit as a lot of the things that I usually said in media today, because you're literally using nature as the best bargaining tool. Like, the whole tables argument was based off of why your value is supposed to lie, and don't get me wrong, it's not like producing children is a bad thing or it's not valuable. Trust me, it is. It's just, it's a superpower that's held by, I don't know, every biological woman, or at least most of them, because I know that there are some that are unable to produce kids right off the bat, but still, like, it's not that it's that special that you'd make one particular woman specifically, marriage material because of it. like that just puts, I don't know, probably like 70-80% of women already on the possible marriage list in terms of age from like, I guess, the age of 13 to like maybe 40, depending on when the menopause hit. And this is why I sort of have a problem with a lot of the men in media that speak to women, because on one end, it's either they set the bar extremely low for guys, or they just say some shit that panders to women. And how would I put this? That just speaks in a way that just sounds good to a lot of women. And this just sounds like one of those things. Steve Harvey is a particularly big culprit of this. A lot of times he'll say stuff that is contradicting. And I'm not a particularly big fan of a lot of the quote-unquote advice that he'll give, because it'll be one thing today and it'll be another thing tomorrow, and it'll be the same exact topic. But all of that aside, while I was busy contemplating how bullshit of a statement this guy was saying, I was actually having a conversation on DMs with a friend of mine. And it was something about the kind of guy that would be introduced to her as a potential husband and shit. And she was talking about if the guy has money or not. And we were talking about, you know, what would happen if it was the mom who actually introduced the guy to her. And there was something interesting that she said out of all of it, where she was like, you know, the thing with my parents is, it's not like they'll get someone with a lot of money. As long as the guy has a job and he's hardworking, he'll just be recommended like that. He'll be considered marriage material. And I stopped for a second when I was busy responding, because I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of how our parents did it back in the day. And it suddenly hit me that when you actually look across different generations and how they were dating and what they were looking for, it all differs quite a bit. And you actually start to realize this once you actually pay a little bit more attention. Because when you look at our parents, so people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s even, and you actually look at what it is that they were looking for and stuff that would make someone wife or husband material, you actually find that their desires, their requirements were different from what we want, because they were there during a different time. And if you look at our grandparents, it was also from a different time. And I'm sure they probably had these discrepancies. So when you hear someone like Steve Harvey, who's in his 60s, if I'm not wrong, busy talking about how, you know, the whole asking her what she brings to the table shouldn't be an issue, then it now starts to make sense why he'd say that. You know, minus the whole pandering to women thing. I'm actually going to try and assume that one for now. Because when you kind of pay attention to how a lot of our older folk, the parents, the uncles, aunts, talk about getting a potential partner, you actually realize that they don't focus on the same shit that we do. So, especially for the babes who'll say they want someone who's tall, dark, handsome, financially stable and shit, a lot of times you'll be told by someone, especially if they're in like the 60s, 70s or 80s, find a good man who is hardworking that can take care of you. And then they'll leave it at that. You know, they'll believe that, you know, you can understand how that is and break it down into like the small qualities that you'd expect from a person. And if you care about them, you know, go ahead and do some shit. If you meet someone who's in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, more so 50s and 60s. The 40s are technically still millennials, so that's a different generation. If you actually ask them about dating and the kind of person that you'd consider as a potential long-term mate, they'll sort of understand the whole desire for you to want to be someone who's financially stable, but they won't want you to prioritize it. So they'll be like, you know, find someone who's hardworking, someone that you can build with, but more so someone that will love you and someone that you can be compatible with. Like, that's mostly what they look into. And then the financial stability part will sort of be like a third, fourth, fifth, sixth option type thing. Because as long as you guys are comfortable enough together, you guys can actually lean on each other and build, because that's how a lot of them actually build the sort of wealth that they have. But now, if you look at, you know, the millennials, more so the later stage millennials, like us guys, people who are in the early, mid, maybe even going to the early 40s, you find that now that's when the liking of someone who's financially stable, that's if you're a woman looking for a potential long-term guy, will sort of come in. With a lot of guys, that's where the whole talk of loyalty, you know, does she sleep around and shit? What do you know about her? Does she drink like this? Does she party like that? that's when a lot of these things now will start being added on. Because 2 generations ago, that wasn't something that was being discussed. People weren't busy having arguments about how long a babe should be in the club and how much makeup is she putting on and how short is the dress. Nah, like, they weren't having those discussions back then because they didn't have that much of an issue during that time. Our time has that issue. So you kind of look at it and the different desires that are there, like, at the end of the day, just the same way I once said, and I said this, I can't remember in what episode, but we are a slave to the society that we have been brought up in. And as such, you find that for someone who is as old as Steve Harvey, for a lot of the older folk, when they talk about the things that you should desire in a partner, you find that they are speaking from the point in time that they were raised and when they were looking for a partner. So evidentially, you find that in some ways they are actually speaking because they are a slave to the generation and the generational requirements of that time when they were busy trying to look for a mate. Not this current time, but back then when they were trying to date. Because when dude is busy talking like this, and let's say for example he says that money shouldn't be the most important thing for a babe, it's not like he was trying to pick up babes when he was living out of his car. Like, you can't expect the same exact thing for someone who is, say, still in like their late 20s or 30s, still living with their parents, to be looking for some sort of a relationship with a babe. Like, you don't necessarily expect those things because that's something that's mostly happening to a lot of people right now, not back then. Back then, if you are in your 20s and you're still living in your parents' house and you're a guy, then you have problems waiting for you, or at least you're gonna be looked at like you're a part of the furniture or some shit. So all in all, in as much as I'd love to get pissed off at this guy and talk about how shit his selection criteria is, at the end of the day, whatever the hell he's saying is not as a result of him having experience in the dating world of right now with young people. It's as a result of him speaking on the dating market from back when he was a much younger person, which was a very, very different time. For a lot of us guys right now, we have different things that we're trying to look for in a babe, and there's certain things that we should be allowed to ask or not ask or expect from certain women. And it's gonna be the same exact thing with the babes. There's gonna be some things that they're gonna expect from us guys, and not all of us guys are going to have that. And I think that's perfectly fine. So to conclude all of this, the big question is he actually a slave to his generation, or is he just pandering to women? To which I'll tell you, he's probably pandering to women, but he is still speaking as a slave to his generation's dating market. To which I will tell you, I can understand why he'd say what it is that he's saying if he wasn't pandering to women, but at the same time, the kind of dating market that he was in during his time is very different from the dating market that exists right now, and as such, whatever the hell he's saying isn't wrong. It's just as a result of him being a slave to his generation's time of dating. Although, then again, maybe I might be wrong about this shit, and maybe he is right, and maybe just the fact that a woman can produce a child should make the marriage material enough. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime, on Westside, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.